1400 years heresy sown. Truth was twisted, its seeds were grown. Break the lies, spark the mission. Welcome to Quranic Inquisition.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Peace of the Lord to all of you. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. Namaste. Welcome to the show. So today we're going to talk about the also famous Islamic dilemma in the Quran, or perhaps the lack thereof. So Kash, hello Kash, how are you doing?
Doing well. So we're going to have a look at this Islamic dilemma. People keep talking about this. What's this all about?
Yeah, it's been around now for a little while, and it seems to actually always give the absolute win when people are actually playing this card correctly. So let's actually get into the material. Would you like to explain, perhaps, in a few words, what the Islamic dilemma actually is for anyone who hasn't actually heard about it?
Yeah, so the Islamic dilemma is this conundrum that exists, this dilemma that exists, hence the naming. And the dilemma is the following, that according to the standards of Islamic narrative, it purports that there's a third revelation, the Quran, which affirms the previous revelations as per its contents when we look into it. And on quick observance, we see, okay, it's confirming the Torah and the Injil, right? So in the sin, the idea is that the Quran comes with the third revelation, confirming the previous revelations, yet simultaneously, seemingly contradicting what was found in the previous revelations. So that's the Islamic dilemma, which is put forward by Christian apologists.
Yeah. So if the the Quran at the same time affirms and also denies the previous scriptures, which then creates this other loophole of saying, okay, that means that the scriptures were fine, but then they were corrupted. And it's like, but the Quran actually affirms them. And you go around and around in circles, and there is no end to it. Well, let's have a look at the verses. First, this is actually like obviously a lot of stuff. Not all of them are about the Islamic dilemma, but as preparation for the show, I thought I'm going to ask Grog to think very hard and to give us all of the possible verses that talk in any possible way about the Islamic dilemma, or that it will do anything like affirming the previous scriptures or contradicting the previous scriptures. So basically, the whole shebang. So let's get started and see what we find. So the first section here. We have these verses here. So the main one is 241, which is, and believe by what I have descended, authenticating what is with you, and do not be the first coverer by it, and do not purchase a little price by my signs, and so forfend me. So the interpretation of that one would be believe by what I have descended, meaning the Quran. And he's like, okay, cool. So when Muslims will say, no, you see, we have this verse here, or saying you have corrupted your scriptures. Christian apologists would then point at this and says, but no, it's authenticating what they have. And if they have it, and we actually have manuscripts from way before the time of Islam, they haven't changed. So there is a problem there. Now, so the problem with this verse is that instead of just taking it in isolation, we go back to the previous one and we see the one that comes after. So Surah 2, verse 40, it says, "O sons of Israel," okay, or children of Israel. That is already interesting because the children of Israel are the Jews. They're not the Jews and Christians. When the Quran talks about the children of Israel, is the Jews. And it says, "Remember my grace, which I have graced over you, and fulfilled by my covenant, and I fulfill by your covenant, and so be intimidated of me." So this is addressing the Jews and is talking about them in the past. So when then we get to the next verse and says, "And believe by what I have descended," authenticating what is with you. This is talking to the Jews, saying, we have sent down, according to the Quran, Jesus and or the Injil, because it says both, confirming what is with you. It is not talking about the Christians, sorry, the Muslims, following the Quran and authenticating the Torah and the Injil. It is addressing the sons of Israel. So the very first verse here that Muslims would interpret as this is talking about the Quran confirming the Torah and the Injil, it isn't. It is talking about Jesus confirming the Torah or the Injil confirming the Torah. Would you agree with that, Kash?
Yeah, in fact, JC, let's zero in on some of the details of verse 40 here, where it says, "Remember my grace which I have graced over you, and fulfilled by my covenant." So it's God saying that he fulfilled his covenant, and then it says, "I fulfilled by your covenant," right? Which is, hopefully you don't hear, there's a lot of hail happening now and some noise outside. Kind of inconvenient. Can you hear that on my end?
I can only hear your voice.
Okay, so that's better then. Okay, it's quite loud here. Anyway, point being is that in the verse, it's saying that fulfilled by my covenant. So basically, it's saying that God fulfilled both sides of the covenant, which is super fascinating, okay? Because God's side of the covenant was the promise to Abraham that he would bless the nations through his seed, right? So this blessing of the nations through the seed is being highlighted here as saying that this was fulfilled. So that's clearly pointing to the fulfilling of that through Jesus. And it gets even more extreme because it says that he, God, also fulfilled the side of the covenant of the sons of Israel, right? So what does it mean that he says he fulfilled the covenant of the sons of Israel? That is the Mosaic law, right? Follow all these, laws, blah, 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 right? Who fulfilled all those laws? There's only one person who fulfilled all the law, right? That's why we say that the Old Testament is fulfilled in Christ. The side of the covenant that was meant for the Israelites, like to follow this perfect law, whatever, right? This was fulfilled by God too in the person of Jesus. So, like the phraseology of Surah 2, verse 40, makes it very clear that it's talking about the incarnation. Whether they believe in a full incarnation or this other idea, right? That's another thing. But it seems very clear from 240 that it's talking about the two-way fulfilling of this covenant, which is a very interesting idea if you really dig deep into it. What do you think, JC?
Yeah, that yes, the top bit is actually just talking to the Jews and actually saying, "Remember the priest," basically, and then and now believe by this new stuff. And when we get to the next verse, and do not clothe the truth by invalidity and mute the truth, and you know it. So this is basically just talking to the Jews, saying, "Look, you had the previous scriptures, the previous everything, and all of that was fulfilled. Now I have sent to you something that confirms all of that, so that we are now all in the same page. And do not lie about it. Do not say, hey, no, those prophecies are not fulfilled. The prophecies are just something else. We're waiting for somebody else. So do not clothe
Wait,
the
but
truth."
JC,
So
did you not? Okay, so maybe I wasn't clear. I'll try to repeat. Like the whole point about 240 is this emphasis on like fulfilling my covenant and fulfilling your covenant. It's a very particular language, covenantal language. The covenant on the side of the children of Israel was to follow the law. And then on the side of God, his covenant in exchange was to bless the nations through Abraham's seed, right? So this verse is saying that he fulfilled both sides of the covenant, which is this mystery. Okay, how does God fulfill the side of the covenant of the children of Israel? By being born of them and living the law perfectly. This is the point. Like it's crystal clear. Actually, now I'm obsessed with this verse now that I see it, right? Because it's making a claim about the covenantal relationship, and it could only be fulfilled with this language we're seeing here if it's talking about God fulfilling the covenant on the side of the children of Israel by living the life perfectly through Jesus, and then fulfilling his side of the arrangement by blessing the nations through him, right? So it's really cool language here.
yeah, and just to actually even delve deeper into the whole problem that is the Islamic dilemma, so these things would have to be interpreted with the new story about the Quran and then superimposed. So first, the first verse is talking to the Jews. So okay, so this is not talking to the Christians at all. Fine. And then when it says, "I have descended something," so that now has to be the Quran, even though it is not in the text. And it says, "Do not cover by it, do not deny by it," all of those things. And then do not clothe the truth. And it's like, okay, let's think about this in the standard Islamic narrative. It would have to be talking to the Jews, probably in Medina, and saying, "You see, you know that what we have here, the Quran, which they cannot read because they are just reciting, of course, that they need to understand that that is actually the truth." And Muhammad would be telling them, "Oh, and don't deny that it is the truth." When the Jews would be like, "What are you talking about? I mean, some of the things that you are saying, they are Talmudic legends. It makes no sense. So the Islamic dilemma doesn't exist in these verses. It exists in the interpretation of these verses. When we are putting Islam all over them, then you have an Islamic dilemma. When we actually just read what it says and we understand exactly what it was meant to be, which is what Kash just said, they're talking to the Jews and it's about the coming of Jesus. And he's telling them, don't basically play with the prophecies and stuff, just say it as it is, because everything has now been fulfilled, right?
Yeah, 100%. So it's just not here, right? The Islamic dilemma. So maybe we'll find it in some other verses though.
Yep. So the next one, which are Surah 3, verse 3 and 4, we're going to leave those ones for the end because it's one of the few that are very, very dodgy and difficult to unpack. But in the meantime, we can actually carry on and see other stuff which it causes trouble. Let's see, did I actually add? Yeah. So these ones here, Surah 5, verses 44 to 48. Instead of actually reading the whole thing, we will just focus on the interesting things. So it starts with, surely we have descended the Torah. Okay, so that's great. We have now a starting place. In it, guidance and light to and light the prophets who submitted, judged by it, and so on and so forth. Okay, so first verse, we have the Torah. And then it continues with 45, which is actually not included even in the list on the left because it doesn't really give us a lot of information. And we have written over them in it that the self is by the self and so on. That is actually from the Talmud. Now 46. And we, question mark, over the traces by Isa, son of Miriam, authenticating
Wait,
what is between
just
his
one
two
second.
hands.
JC, I'm pretty sure that's from the Torah, not the Talmud, right? Eye for an eye?
I thought it was in the, I think the full sentence was in the Talmud. In the
Oh, the
Torah, it
exact
says eye
phrasing.
for an eye.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Rather, it has a lot of stuff in it, more than the Torah. That's definitely. So in 46, now we have changed. So it started saying, okay, so here you have the Torah. And then we have, actually, no, that one is probably just copied from the Torah when it's saying we have descended the Torah and we have written over them this. So it's probably saying this is meant to be found in the Torah and there is extract, but it's not the full detail, not as it is in the Quran. Anyway, so after talking about the Torah, we get to verse 46. And then it's talking about Isa, son of Miriam. And what does it say? Authenticating to what is between his two hands of the Torah. And we advanced him the Injil, which also authenticates what is between his two hands of the Torah. Now, this expression, which of course Kash and I were working on exactly like what it means, but we're going to take it just as, at face value that this verse tells us everything that we need to know, which is Jesus authenticates the Torah, confirms the Torah, and also the Injil or the good news confirms the Torah. Now, for any Christian, that would make sense, would say Jesus is the fulfillment of the prophecies and the law, and the good news is really this is the new covenant, right? Now, when we continue, and let the eligibles of the Injil judge by what Allah has descended in it. Okay, so we went from the Torah to then Jesus, who confirms the Torah, and then saying those of the Injil, let them judge by it. And then it gets interesting. The next one, 48. And we descended the writing by truth unto thee, authenticating to what is between his two hands from the writing and hegemonic over it. Now, that one is very cool. If you check any of the translators, oh, by the way, I should have said all of this is pretty much most of these translations are Murad's. I should have actually added his picture in there, but probably people will know already by heart. So this is actually Murad's translation. If you go to another translator like Daif International or someone like that, you will see that it will say, we sent down the to you Muhammad or something like this. They will shoehorn either Muhammad or the Quran. They will make sure that what you read in verse 48 is that the Quran, that is talking about the Quran, is talking about Muhammad, but there is absolutely nothing in it to do with the Quran or with Islam. So if we're talking about the Torah and then Isa and the Injil, that is the only thing that has been discussed. So when it says we descended the writing, authenticating what is between his two hands, which is exactly the same thing that we've seen before. What is between his two hands? The Torah. And being hegemonic over it. So this would be nothing to do with Islam, nothing to do with the Quran, and all to do about saying, okay, so now we're talking about the Injil. Now you, the listener, have the Injil, and which confirms what is between his two hands, confirms the Torah, and is how do they normally translate hegemonic?
Hegemonic is the
Sash?
word muhaimin, right? So
Yes.
muhaimin is the word that Murad gives us hegemonic. Other translators use terms like watcher, guardian, and the one that they love to use is this idea of like criterion. They smuggle that in. So an idea of like the overarching, the hegemonic. Like Murad is kind of leaning on whatever, like this sense, the sense of it being a criterion over things, right? But we, as we saw with our Muhaimin episode, this Muhaimin term is attested in the Syriac, and it means to be faithful, to be a believer. And this sense of to be faithful or to believe in something is kind of similar to the idea of to be a guardian over something. It's kind of similar, but it's a bit more nuanced, right? Because the point is that only a person can be a believer or be faithful. You need agency. But something like an object can be a watcher in a metaphorical sense, or a text could be a watcher or a guardian. So this is the sense of this word given in the sin as guardian, watcher, or they push it as far as to say like I've heard some people say corrector and this kind of stuff, but that's just pulling at straws, right? So the word suggests agency because the true layer is faithful, but by removing that, they can make it into an object, something that was prior, most likely a person.
Right. So, and even if we just go with this other meaning that they force onto the text of criterion over it, it would still work as saying, okay, so this is talking about the Injil, and it would be the criterion over the Torah, which we're having other thoughts about this, but just reading the literal translation, the one thing that I think that we can really agree on that it has nothing to do with the Quran, with Islam, and we are just reading all of that into the text. Would you agree with that?
Right, but yeah, well, slightly. It can't be. This is the point. The point is that once you see that this whole hegemonic, muhaimin, this word, whatever, once you see that under all the dust, it's actually pointing to a person because it says someone who is faithful or a believer, and that can't be an object, right? So it can't be the Injil, right? It can't be. What it's actually pointing to is the Kitab bil Haq, which is not just any old Kitab. But yeah, so I would say that what it's pointing to here is it is saying that the Kitab bil Haq is actually the person of Jesus, who is a believer and faithful over the Torah.
Right. So still no Islam. Let's actually carry on and see what else we find. But those verses are actually used with the narrative quite a bit. So 568, I can't remember. Okay. Would you like to take care of this one?
Sure thing. One moment. So we're reading Surah 5, Ayah 68. We read, Say, O eligibles of the writing, ye are not over a thing until ye upstand the Torah and the Injil and what has been caused to descend unto you from your Lord. And indeed, he will indeed increase many of them what has been caused to descend unto thee from thy Lord. In transgression and in covering, so do not be of tragic over the covering menful.
Right.
So for this one, what we see, right? We see that there's talking about that you have. This is the question. We find verses like this in the discussion of the Islamic dilemma because it says, okay, we don't trust the Old Testament; they're corrupted, right? But it's saying that you're not over a thing, right? This is the issue. It's like the text is very clear in its affirmation of the Torah and the Injil. It's very, very strict about this. So we can see here, you're meant to uphold the Torah and the Injil, upstand it. Otherwise, you are indeed not over anything. What do you
Yes.
think?
And well, this actually is another of these verses that is used a lot during the Islamic dilemma, because it will be like, well, you see, it's saying that the Torah and the Injil are phenomenal. And well, and then that actually creates all of the other problems. But I think the other important bit in there is that says, well, the Torah, the Injil, and what has been caused to descend onto you. It's like, okay, What does that mean? They will have to interpret that as, well, that has to be the Quran. So like this, you see, you have 1, 2, and 3, except that you have the Torah by name, the Injil by name, and then something else very mystical that has been caused to descend. I think the interpretation of that for people listening to those words in the 7th century would be the Torah, the Injil, and what has been caused to descend would be the Spirit. No?
Yes, but also maybe Jesus himself.
Yeah, maybe
Because
Jesus himself.
because it's like the idea is, okay, so what is from God in this world? The Torah is from God. Okay, number one, we have the Torah is from God, the Injil is from God. Okay, Jesus is also from God, so that makes the list as well, right? So that which, if you have a naming of the Torah and the Injil, and then also that which descends from your Lord, what's the third one? It's Jesus. He's also from the Lord, but it could be the Spirit too. Depends what they're
And
getting
so,
at here contextually.
yeah, and so far we haven't actually seen anything that we can say, well, look, this is very, very clearly talking about the Quran. When we look a little bit about the context or what it means, the key words from Islam are missing. And when we look a little bit about the context, like in the previous ones, it seems to actually be talking so far about Jews and Christians, and that's that. Right. So let's carry on and see what else we have. Okay, a little section here. Did I highlight stuff? Okay, yes. So Surah 6, verse 154. Thereafter, we advance Musa the writing, a perfection over he who bettered, and a distinguishment for everything, and a guidance and a mercy that they may believe by the encounter of their Lord. So Moses and writing, that's great. The next one. And this writing we have descended it as blessed. So follow it, and for friend that ye may be mercified. Okay, so you need to follow the writing. That's good. That ye say, surely the writing was only caused to descend over 2 groups from before us. It's like, okay, that's interesting. Is that supposed to be talking about the Torah descending over 2 groups, Christians and Jews? There is already a little bit of confusion there. And then the next one, or ye say, had the writing been caused to descend over us, we would have indeed been more guided than them. Hmm. What do you make of these verses?
Yeah, it seems to me that what we have here is the author framing this discussion about Torah, angel of the Lord, etc., and also the question of the children of Israel. Because there's this question, okay, so if God chose them to reveal the Torah to, are they, exalted above all nations? This kind of question. And it seems the author is putting the emphasis on not even Musa as a person, but it's the emphasis is on essentially the angel of the Lord. It's the one who is blessed, which makes me start to think that Al-Kitab in this context may not even refer necessarily to the Torah itself, which is interesting because I was just reading it now. It seems to me that we advanced Musa the writing, a perfection over he who bettered and a distinguishment for everything and a guidance. Okay, so it does sound like Torah wise. But regardless, it seems my initial impression is that it's stripping the focus and the emphasis away from, let's say, the Jewish people, the children of Israel as such, and placing it more so in the fact that they like who came to meet them, rather than that they were the ones who met the angel of the Lord. It's almost like the emphasis is on, God's role in the matter rather than the Israelite people.
Yeah, I think that the reason why Grok actually gave these verses possibly is because of verse 155, when then it says, and this writing we have descended it as blessed. It's possible that it is understood by some people, probably from the tafsir, that then that becomes again the Quran, and that you have to follow the
Right.
Quran
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
on. Maybe not, maybe not. As I said, this is actually Grok, and we are very familiar with quite a few of these verses, but not with all of them. So that could be the case. But in any case, everything that we can see in front of us, it's talking pretty much about the Torah, taking that interpretation without actually delving into the whole Al-Kitab meaning. It looks
Right. So
like
we
there
can
is no
we can
Islam
leave
in
it.
here.
Right. So we can leave it here where this isn't even really in the same category. This is talking about Moses, is talking about the means of revelation to him, and it's a discussion about, whether, because the key thing here for the author is, or ye say that had the writing been caused to descend over us, we would have indeed been more guided than them. It's this resentment. There's a resentment there a little bit, like, if only the Bani Israel wasn't chosen, but instead we were chosen. And the text is implicitly rebuking that sentiment. because God chose, and therefore God chose. You can't be mad that God chose, right? The children of Israel. So there seems to be that element here. But generally speaking, like this has nothing to do with the Islamic dilemma. Like the question about the Quran, Muhammad, like this has nothing to do with this verse. So we can move on.
So if anyone ever hears 155 is about the Quran, just make sure that you actually read the verses before and after and realize that it has absolutely nothing to do with the Quran, if that's actually something that anyone will ever claim. But they have other verses that they would normally go to. And so let's continue and see what else we find. And please, now that you are quite a few of you here, if you would be so kind as to give us a like, hopefully that will get more people seeing this and, getting the algorithm to like us a little bit more. So thank you for your help, support, subscribes, and all of those things. Let's carry on and see what else we find. Oh, oh yes. Oh, look, I actually wrote that one. I forgot. It's been a while. So Sahi, Dave International, my very good friend Dave International says, and this, and in brackets, Quran, is a book we have revealed. Blessed is like, okay, fine. So I was right about that. You see how they shoehorn something? It's talking about Moses and the scripture and the Torah, and then just like that, oh no, and this writing we have this is the Quran. And it's like, no, it's not. It's
Yeah,
never
it's
been.
unbelievable. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to see a lot of this going forward. Ooh, I like it. In and out. Okay, next. Surah 1094. Let's see. So, if thou were in doubt of what we have descended unto thee, then ask those who read the writings from before thee. Now, well, indeed, the truth has already come to thee from thy Lord, so do not be of the wranglers. Of course, anyone just listening to this will realize the truth has already come to thee from thy Lord. I wonder what the truth is. But anyway, so this is as well another verse that it is used a lot when Christian apologists will say, when Muslims say, you corrupted your scriptures. They point at this one and they say, but uh, God said to Jibril to tell Muhammad that in the eternal book, he's telling to people that if he's in doubt, which it would make you think, why would Muhammad be in doubt? He's receiving revelations directly from Jibril, right? But if he's in doubt, he goes to those who were reading the scriptures before. And then that is interpreted as go to the Jews and Christians. Well, absolutely not. This has nothing to do with any of that. This is actually addressing Christians or new converts. When it's saying, if you have a doubt about the Injil, about Jesus, about all of these things that we're telling you, go to the Jews because they have the prophecies over there. They are going to tell you, yes, you were waiting for the we were waiting for the Messiah and so on, and they might believe in him or not, but the confirmation is in the Old Testament. So this would be read in the context of Christians speaking to Christians, saying, if you are in doubt, go to the Jews. Not in the context of Islam, saying, if you are in doubt about this revelation, Muhammad, even though you are getting it from Jibril, if you are in doubt, go to the Jews and Christians, because that would not make any sense. Would you agree with that, Kash?
Yeah, it's very interesting how it doesn't say, it doesn't specify who these people are who, have been reading the writing from before thee. Um, so therefore, in the sin, it takes on this meaning, and all the Christian apologists obviously run with it because that's what makes sense given the whole framework, that this is referring to a 7th century revelation, which is being given to a man in the middle of the, in Hijaz, and therefore it's in the context of this third revelation, and therefore the people who are reading the writings from before you, it's talking about those reading the Injil, reading the Psalms, reading the, it's therefore talking about the Christians and the Jews, right? But that's not what the verse even is really saying, right? You have to read that again. It's this is the pattern. You have to read things into verses in accordance with the standard Islamic narrative lens. Otherwise, they're not even really there. So this verse, it seems very natural for it to be discussing, uh, you know, if you're in doubt about the fulfillment of the prophecies, go ask those who've been reading the scriptures before because they have those prophecies. That's what it's pointing to. It's saying the Torah prophesied Messiah. Therefore, if you're in doubt about anything of this, ask those who've been reading the scriptures before you, and they will confirm it because the prophecies are in their scripture.
Indeed. So, Mashallah, hi. Good to actually have you here. I think your name is one of my favorite ones out there. Actually, very, very good pick. I will just give you a little something to think about the whole thing about Allah says His word can be changed, and then of course you say, and the Torah and the Injil, that is His word. But when it says that He cannot change His word or nobody can change His word, does it mean the Torah and the Injil Or does it mean that nobody can change his word? Hmm. Food for thought. I think we will talk about that one soon enough. You know what I mean, Cash? Okay, let's carry on, see what happens. And 29. All
I'll
right,
go ahead
so,
and I'll go ahead and read this one.
okay.
So verse 46 in Surah 29, and do not antagonize with the eligibles of the writing except by that which is better, except those who darkened of them, and say, we have believed by which has been descended unto us and has been descended unto you, and our deity and your deity is one, and we are submitters to him. What's your thoughts, JC?
Wow, lots of thoughts, but I think you have some interesting ideas about this one. So I'll let you take the floor.
Well, so okay, I guess I'll mention that in the context of this, it's quite interesting that it's saying, because okay, to frame this is that these eligibles of the writing, this comes from the Arabic al-kitab, which is this idea of the people of the book. This makes sense within a standard Islamic narrative frame where you have this third ummah, this third community, this third religion, this third revelation, where they are doing an ecumenicalism, like they're being ecumenical in the sense that, okay, us, the Jews, the Christians, we're all people of the book. So it's this sort of like umbrella term for all of the Abrahamic religions. But, that's likely not what this was pointing to in the 7th century, given that there was no concept of a third community that came later, right? So what exactly are we looking at, therefore, when we're looking at this whole idea of people of the book? One sense that I found, which I found particularly interesting and compelling, was that the orthography of Alif Ha Lam, Al, which is what we see here, is attested in the Syriac as having the meaning of mockers, people who mock. So therefore, uh, it could have this idea of, instead of it being people of the book, therefore in context it would say, do not antagonize with the people of the book except by that which is better. So it's like, don't antagonize except in the good way. It's like, okay, how to interpret that? Let's go to the tafsirs, I guess. But point being is that maybe when we're looking at eligibles of the writing or eligibles of the Injil, for example, like people of the Injil judge only by what, judge what Allah has revealed, it may just simply be otherwise, that it's not talking about, like, the eligibles or the people of the book or people of this or people of that, but it's rather talking about those who criticize the book or the mockers, the sneerers, right? So in that sense, that it would be talking about, like in the other verse we looked at, people of the Injil judged by what Allah has revealed therein, right? It would say something like this: do an internal critique, right? Because if you would say, like, okay, the critiques of the Injil judged by what Allah has revealed therein. What I'm saying, therefore, is, hey, don't take your external standards that you take from Greek philosophy or whatever, and push them into and use them to criticize the Injil. No, you can't do that. You have to criticize the Injil based on its own standards. So that's maybe what that would be potentially getting at. So in the context of this, it says maybe then, do not antagonize with the critics or the mockers of the writing, except that by that which is better. Except in the rest of the verse, we need to re-render because there's hardly much that can really be deduced out of that, except the seeming ecumenical statement at the end. But yeah, anyway, so that's just to add that in there to put that little nuance. What do you think, JC?
Well, I think I agree with your explanation of the first half. And I think on the second half, we have a lot that we can unpack from the moment when it says, and say, okay, so this is something that people are meant to say, right? So say, we have believed by that which has been descended onto us and has been descended onto you, and our deity and your deity is one. And we submit to him. Actually, I wonder who him is. Obviously the deity, but if it is saying we have believed by that, let's actually try to rework a little bit of how people would understand this at the time. We have believed by that which has been descended onto us, the Injil, and has been descended onto you, the Torah. and your and our deity and your deity is one. This is, I see it as the Christians talking to the Jews saying, we actually worship the same God. We just
Yeah.
understand that it is Trinity and it is not the way that you saw him before.
Well, not before, right? the way you see him now with your whole Ein Sof idea, with all this complex tree of life ideology and all this kind of stuff, right? It's saying that, we believe in what has been descended. We believe that what has been descended through your ancestors, right? It's saying that, we believe in the one God. It's this kind of statement of like, what should you say? It seems like this, like what should you articulate when confronted by someone who's criticizing the Injil or criticizing Messiah, right? How to approach that conversation? Say that we believe in the idea here is we believe in the full revelation. You stop believing halfway through. It's something along those lines.
Yes, and it is talking to the ones that actually are, say, at the other end of the fence, the other side of the fence, and they actually have the full revelation. So you don't just believe in what it was descended onto them, but you also believe on something that has been descended onto you. And this makes even more sense if the people speaking this happen to be Gentiles and addressing actual Jews or something like that. So I think it is again all should be quite clear that it has nothing to do with Islam and all to do with it actually sounds a lot like Christians speaking with Jews and saying, hey, we're on the same page. It also makes a lot of sense when we think that the Bible has the first part of the Bible is actually the Jewish scriptures, is everything that had come before it. It was not suppressed, it was not deleted. And it is like, guys, so we have this second part. You don't, but everything is connected. We are not now worshiping a different God. We are all on the same team, something like that. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then the next one, Surah 42, verse 7, is the other only one that is dodgy, just like Surah 3, verse 3 and 4. So we're going to leave that one for the end. This is the first section. So let's see now other verses in here. Let's go with Surah 2, verse 75. So, do you covet that they believe for you and a separate group of them were already hearing the speech of Allah, thereafter perverted it from after they had considered it and they know? Interesting. What do you think, Ash?
Well, it's saying basically, why do you seek their applause? You've seen what makes them, boo, or the inverse. Like, why do you seek their affirmation when they're the ones who, after hearing the speech of Allah, thereafter perverted it? It's very obvious that this is addressing the Jewish people very clearly, because it's saying, do you covet that they believe for you? Like, do you seek their affirmation? And a separate group, it's like Farik is the word in Arabic. It could mean maybe deliverer. It's based on the same root as Purkan, right? And a deliverer of them were already, so something like that, or we'll stick with separate group, right? Already hearing the speech of Allah, thereafter perverted from after they had considered it, and they know. So one thing that comes to mind is who spoke to God face to, not face to face, but who spoke directly with the angel of the Lord, right? This was Moses, right? So if it's literally about hearing the speech of Allah rather than something more loose like reading the Torah, right? Because that's like a relaying of that initial transmission of speech where the angel of the Lord brought this to Moses. So maybe it's even this is where it gets a bit esoteric. Maybe it's even a criticism of sort of mosaicism as such. But anyway, point being is that on a broad level, it's very clear that this is referring to a criticism of Christians to other Christians who they feel are seeking the validation from Jewish people, and therefore it's a condemnation of them. Because why do you seek their validation when they are the ones who rebelled against God before, after hearing his words, and then after that denying?
Yeah, and the way that I understand it would be that, okay, so once again, it is about Christians and Jews having a conversation, and the Christians are saying to the Jews, okay, so they heard the speech of Allah. So they knew what was coming, they knew the prophecies, they knew all of that. And then some of them, here we are in the 7th century, say, no, 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 Jesus was not the Messiah. He didn't fulfill the prophecies. He didn't fulfill the law and all of those things. So basically just saying, they already heard that God was going to send the Messiah. They already knew what was going to happen. And yet here there are a few who are still saying, no, those things didn't happen. And then they change the meaning of the prophecies and these sort of things. Just like a little bit, like our friend here has actually said this, which I think Kash, you might want to comment, because I know that you have been thinking about this for a while, which is about changing the scriptures in a way that you remove Jesus or some of his miracles from the scripture.
Yeah, could point to the argument between Masoretic Jews and the Septuagint Christians. Yeah, it sounds like it. And yeah, this whole question of what was happening with the Masoretic text, and also there was some obfuscation in Targumic transmission. So if you search up Targum Jonathan and have a look at how he renders things like Isaiah 9:6 and these other such, very stark sonship verses. There's a lot of, let's say, funny business going on there in terms of the Masoretic text. One good example of the Masoretic text corruption, which I find very interesting, and it also relates to the Quranic situation, is that there's, I think it's Isaiah 13:7. In this verse, it's read in the Masoretic text today, and therefore also in the Protestant tradition. This is how it reads. It says something along the lines of, that the punishment of God basically is that you are being going to be ruled by women and children, right? And which is like, okay, that's kind of interesting. The thing is, if you go to the Septuagint, the verse reads that it's actually that you are being ruled over by uh, money lenders, creditors. This is what the verse is talking about. And the reason why this ambiguity is possible between the two is because the root, the skeletal form of both women and creditors is the same. It's noshe. And then there's like nashe, noshe. Like basically, you can put vowelization to distinguish between creditor and woman. So it's very interesting. So the Septuagint attests the most likely original intention of that verse. And then by the time you get to the 7th century, you now have the verse talking about punishment by having women rule over you. And the reason I said this applies to the Quran as well is because we have verses that have a very interesting word. They have Surah An-Nisa. Nisa, Nisa, Noshe. It's the same root form in terms of consonants. So if in the Masoretic text, what was initially referring to moneylenders got corrupted to become women, maybe in the Quran when it's talking about women, it's actually talking about moneylenders. See how that works?
Yeah, that's very interesting. And even though we don't actually delve into that particular conversation, we do know that things were happening around the 7th century with these translations. So we're trying to keep an ear peeled for any news on that. We know that there are people actually working on that. And like Kash said, it does feel like something like this was happening with the Quran itself, where meanings were actually changed, except that, of course, with the Quran, it took a whole different dimension. Very interesting.
Yeah,
All
yeah. So
right.
like the criticisms people might have of, okay, like there's Masoretic text corruption, yada yada, and there definitely is. And like the most egregious cases I would point to is like the Book of Esther and a couple other things, right? But for the most part, it's still faithful, right? So there's some like diacritic games being played, etc. But for the most part, it's relatively stable. So therefore, you could akin it basically to that phenomena of, let's say, limited corruption. That's what we see on steroids in the case of the Quranic tradition.
Yes. Corruption gone wrong. Uh, all right. So 279. So woe to those who write the writing by their hands thereafter. Say this is from at Allah. That's weird. To purchase a little price by it. So woe to them from what their hands have written, and woe to them from what they earn. Now that one I shouldn't actually have included it there, but I just wanted to actually make it clear that that's exactly what happens with Islam. Think about this. This verse is saying those who write scripture, they write things and then they say it's a scripture, it comes from God. Woe to them. And we have seen here on the channel with Shai from You Reads Quran, showing us stories that are not scripture. They are actually Jewish legends. Everybody knows they are not scripture, but then now they are in the Quran and they have become scripture. So I found it quite interesting that the Quran would actually openly um, criticize those who do something, and that's exactly what we see within the book. Don't you find that interesting, Cash?
Yeah, it's quite ironic, huh? Very much so.
Mm,
So yeah, it's saying, so this verse in terms of how it applies to the Islamic dilemma is that this verse is pointed to sometimes as people saying, yeah, here is where Allah is saying that the Christians corrupted their text or whatever. So, but the thing is, that isn't what this verse is saying at all. I'm sure you've heard this from all the Christian apologists, that this is referring to those who are writing a new book, right? Who writing and then claim it's from God. It's not that they are corrupting the already existing writing, which we know is from God. It's that they are claiming another writing which isn't assumed to be from God because no one thinks it's from God, and then claiming it to be from God. This most likely refers to the Talmud. And therefore, that's the irony of this, is the fact that Talmudic stories seem to find their way into the scripture, at least in terms of the sin reading of the scripture. These stories find their way into the text. So it's ironic, therefore, because this is a verse that's criticizing the very phenomena that seems to have appears to have happened with the text itself.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, this actually goes further than just these Talmudic legends. The whole Quran, they ended up saying, well, this actually comes from God. And he's like, yeah, sure, buddy, but we know it isn't, and it's been obviously mistranslated, and the whole thing is a mess. So this verse is actually criticizing every single Muslim, because this is actually what happened with the Quran. So very, very ironic. So next, 371. O eligibles of the writing, why do you clothe the truth by invalidity and mute the truth while you know? Now, we've seen something almost identical a moment earlier in another verse. The whole thing, like, why do you clothe the truth, or why do you hide the truth? Why are you changing things? So, again, the eligibles of the writing we had seen before, it's not meant to be the Jews and Christians, it's meant to be just the Jews. So, in that context, if it's saying that the Jews, or some of them, they're actually hiding the truth, what people would have understood is for those who obviously have the Old Testament, and they're saying, no, but Jesus didn't fulfill these prophecies. He didn't exist. He wasn't real. It wasn't him, and things like that. So it's criticizing those who have the Old Testament, and they say, no, but Jesus was not the Messiah that we were looking for. Right?
Yeah, and also I think it's very interesting because we see this in many places, this whole phrasing of do not clothe the truth by invalidity. I was looking into this, but I won't get into it now. I will point out, however, that the whole idea of clothing, like putting garments on the truth, I think that's pointing to a deeper truth, which is that whatever the truth we're speaking of, al-haq in question, it's something that you can put clothes on.
Yeah, interesting. We have a question here from Enrico. Question: there is no doubt about Torah being the Torah. However, the Injil, Evangelium, is not as clear-cut. Working hypothesis: the Injil is a Nazarene version of the Gospel of Matthew. Ooh, I think Cash has a few things to say about this.
I'm not sure where I stand anymore. I've heard so many different theories about what Injil is referring to, but the context in terms of the text, like the way that Injil is spoken of hand in hand with Torah or Taurat, it seems like that's probably referring to the good news as such, or even the literal physical text of the Gospels. In terms of what you're referring to, a Nazarene version, I have a suspicion that the gospel according to the Ebionites the gospel according to the Hebrews, the gospel according to the Nazarenes, it has many different ways of referring to it over the years of church father citations. But I have a feeling that there may have been at play a claim about an original Hebrew Matthew, and that's this gospel according to the Hebrews. So potentially, given the context of this time, where there's so much doubt about what is scripture, what isn't scripture, which people have the right interpretation, all this stuff, there isn't the same church authority, given the fact that they're basically out, they're slowly and increasing outside of the realm of the imperial church, the Catholic Church. And therefore, this uncertainty, I could imagine a context, therefore, where someone could come along and say, you guys have so much uncertainty about the scriptures, like with the Reformation, right? So let's go back to the Hebrew, right? Like with the Reformation, let's go back to the Hebrew. Like with Jerome, let's go back to the Hebrew, right? So in that sense, I could see a role being played by a group who has a claim to an original Hebrew Matthew, which according to our sources was written in the Aramaic language using the Hebrew script. Total LARPers, if you ask me, right? But like this could serve a very powerful rhetoric tool, and then maybe played a role in this Reformation movement in the 7th century. That's my intuition. I'm not confident necessarily if maybe Injil is referring to angel and then somehow there's some whatever there. My position is that it's referring to whether it's a specific Nazarene version of the Gospel of Matthew, whether it's, I don't think it's a diatessaron. It's too late for the diatessaron. So I think that if anything, it would be referring either to a standard Orthodox interpretation of the fourfold Gospel as such, or a specific Gospel of Matthew in Hebrew, this kind of thing.
Yeah, or potentially also, although not very likely, to be another sort of pseudo gospel that has now been lost, that it was more of a local thing that somebody actually wrote and now it has been made to disappear. I mean, it's we shouldn't actually go down that path, because if we don't have something, we better actually
Yeah.
not say it. But it's worth to just considering that it's possible that they did actually have something that they called a gospel, the Injil, and it's no longer with us. And if that's the case, we will have many problems as we unpack more and more of the Quran, but we will just do our best and see how much we can actually figure out. For now, and to keep things simple, like at my end, every time that now I see Injil, what I translate in my head is good news. So when it says, and then Jesus was given the Injil, I translate that as, okay, he's just talking about the good news. Whatever these people thought the book was, maybe we will find out, and maybe it is the Gospel of Matthew or something else. But we know that they thought it was the message that Jesus had. So I translate it as good news, and I just move on until we have some clear answers. Next. So what do we have here? So, oh, this is from Now Daif International. I've actually written that one there probably because it makes things a little bit clearer to understand. Anyway, 446. Among the Jews are those who distort words from their usages and say, we hear and disobey, and hear but be not heard, and Raina. Interesting. Twisting their tongues and defaming their religion. And if they had said, we hear and obey, and wait for us, it would have been better for them and more suitable. But Allah has cursed them for their disbelief, so they believe not, except for a few. Now, this one is interesting. Well, like all of the others, the interesting thing is that we always just keep reading that all of this is about Islam, and it is actually Muhammad, and he's there, probably Medina at the time, speaking with the Jews, and he's like, where are the Christians in all of this? The whole area had been Christianized pretty much. So why is it not talking about Christians like all the time? It seems like all of the problems happen to be with these Jewish tribes. And when we realize that the story is just fabricated in order to make things fit, I think it is a lot more plausible that all of these stories are meant to actually be written by, let's say, Christians, probably heretical, but let's say Christians, as opposed to trying to understand if they were Nestorian or Arians, we say Christians. They are actually approaching Jews, and they seem to be saying always the same thing. There are some who say that Jesus is not the Christ, and they twist with their tongues whatever the previous scriptures said, like they deny the prophecies, they do all of those things. To me, it sounds like it's almost like a polemic against them, but it is in a way or done in good faith in order to get the Jews to actually accept the Messiah. At least that's actually the read that I get from most of these verses.
Right, because it's not necessarily saying that all the Jews distort, right? It's saying among the Jews are those who distort, right? It's saying not you, my Jewish audience, but among your people there are those who are deceiving you. Come and, come and hear the full truth, right? It's this sort of tone. So it's clearly that the intention of the text is to convert, which is this pattern we see all over, is to convert non-Messiah believing Jewish people to Messianic Judaism. We can put that term there, right? So that seems to be the intention. That seems to be what's going on here. This is, if anything, about corruption or Islamic dilemma related, it would be corruption of interpretation, right? It's not saying anything about any text or any corruption of text or anything. So this is brought up by Muslims, and then God Logic very quickly dismantles that and says how it's about interpretational corruption, not scriptural corruption. So what we see here is, again, it's a dialogue between Christians and Jews, nothing about the 7th century Hijaz, or nothing about that particular, the details of the sin and the revelation, all that. It's about the Christians and the Jews. It's about interpretational corruption, so it has nothing to do with the Quran, etc., etc.
Yes, it is actually criticizing those who do biddah, because of course we don't have that in Islam in spades. All right.
Yeah,
So,
very much.
would you like to take this one?
Sure. So we read in Surah 5, Ayah 13. So by their reneging of their documentation, we have cursed them and rendered their hearts cruel. They pervert the wordings about their situated places and forgot a fortune of what they were continuously reminded by. And thou dost not cease uprising over a betrayer from them, except a few of them. So exempt about them and overlook surely Allah loves the good doers. My first intuition here is again, it's obviously referring to um, like this, the fact that the reneging of their documentation. I'm seeing something like along the lines of not fulfilling their covenant, right? They've reneged on their duties and so forth. So we curse them, and this is referring most likely to the exile. This is referring to the Bar Kokhba War, the destruction of the Second Temple, etc. All this stuff that they were cursed. The blood is on us and our children. This kind of New Testament idea and rendered their hearts cruel, so they pervert the wordings from the situated places. Again, perverting in interpretation. This is seemingly a pattern. It's referring to Jews consistently. So it's those who corrupt the Old Testament prophecies to dissuade those of knowing the fullness of the truth of the Messiah. This is then being criticized here by the author.
Once again, it looks like criticizing biddah, interpretation, and that's that. And nothing to do with Islam there. Of course, we see Allah, but we know that that word just appears everywhere, and it doesn't mean what they think it does. So, next, the last one in this section. So, did I add something? No. Okay. So, O messenger, those who race swiftly into covering from those who said we have believed by their mouths, while their hearts did not believe, should not grieve thee. And of those who have Judaized are continuous hearers to the lie, continuous hearers to another menfolk, who did not advance thee, perverting the wordings again, perverting the wordings. Here we go. From after their situated places, they say, if ye were advanced this, then take it. And if you were not advanced, then be cautious, and whoever Allah wills his assaying, then thou will never own a thing for him from Allah. Those are they who Allah did not will to purify their hearts. For them in the one close by is mortification, and for them in the last one is a great torment. So I would think that the key words in there is this a huge critique, but about again those who actually pervert the words, they change the words, and again it would have to be all about the messenger. Something as well interesting there. So, O messenger, it starts with O messenger. Then those who race swiftly into covering from those who said we have believed by their mouths, while their hearts did not believed, should not grieve thee. Grieve thee. Why should
Hmm.
anyone grieve thee? Isn't that a little bit weird? Hmm.
Yeah, it's very weird because who's being grieved and who is thee? Thee is presumably the messenger, right?
Mm-hmm. I guess.
Well, you could just say, "Oh, it's about the grieving of Muhammad's death." Okay, done. We've solved it.
Okay, yeah, problem solved. So anyway, this one once again is just really very, very weird, but it's cursing those who actually pervert words and these sort of things. So pretty much the same thing that we've seen before. So this is now, I think, the final section, and then we get to the, well, the penultimate section, and then we go to the final bit. So, should I seek other than Allah as a judge? And he is he who descended unto you the writing, the distinguished writing, I think probably best. And those whom we advance the writing know that it is continuously descended from thy Lord by truth. So be not of the wranglers. And the word of thy Lord was perfected authentically and equivalently, no substituter to his words, and he is the hearer, the knowledgeable. Interesting. Is this supposed to be about Islam? Sorry, you're muted, Kash.
All right. So yeah, I mean, you can you have like this is therefore obviously read in the standard Islamic narrative. It's talking about the Quran, right?
It's supposed to.
Right. But I mean, I don't see anything. that necessarily shows that explicitly. It's again, it's one of these cases where you really have to read it in. You have to read it in, or else it's not there. And the whole thing you highlighted, the word of thy Lord. I'm sure you were going to mention it, but that the fact that word in words is written the same exact way, right?
Pardon, say that again.
That the word in the Arabic for the word here and words here is the same, right?
The yes, the rasam is the same. So the only difference between word and words is the how they apply the diacritics. And like Instagram is saying there, oh, the word in here is a he, but you see, it doesn't say the word; it say the words, but it is diacritics. If the diacritics are just a little bit different, then this would be saying the word.
And the thing is, of course, the reason why they
His
make it words is because naturally he refers to the most proximal subject. And therefore, if it was, to his word, then it would naturally follow that the he, like Instagram here is pointing out, would therefore be referring to the word. But because it's words and he is singular, therefore it's sort of obscured, right? Therefore, it can't be referring to the word or whatever the kalima is. We'll leave it there, right? So it seems to be, yes, this whatever this word is exactly what we're dealing with here, it appears to be a he. Another alternative would be no, the he is referring back all the way to Allah, but that's not consistent with standard grammatical rules, right? You use he to refer to the latest subject, not to refer back to the previous verse when it was talking about Allah.
Well, now that Insta has actually mentioned this, well, let's think about this. I do think that this was actually supposed to be the word or his word, because we see it earlier on in the very same verse. And the word of thy Lord, any Christian would know what that means, was perfected authentically and equivalently, no substitute to his word. And then, like Kash said in Arabic, once it says, and he, that would be the last thing that has been mentioned. It would be his word is the hearer, the knowledgeable. And now we have a big, big problem. So we see why this has to be read as his words, because otherwise the problem is pretty much infinite.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And on the comment that we got just a little bit earlier, sorry, I cannot find it now, but from Enrico, when I said, when it says about there is no substitute to his words, and that is normally interpreted as, well, that means the Torah and it means the Injil, but now then they say that it's been corrupted. And I said, well, think about this. I didn't remember that we actually had this on the slides, but I think it's possible that what it means is something else. Like nobody can substitute or nobody can change his word, not his words, and his word is the hearer, the knowledgeable. Anyway, I know that this actually causes a lot of trouble, but I don't think that there is much Islam in here.
I mean, all I see is it's pointing at Jesus. That's all I read here.
Yeah, I mean, if we had seen less than 100 verses where Jesus and the Spirit is hidden, would be surprised. It's been probably more than that. So we just see it everywhere. And every time we see the truth and the word and thy Lord, these sort of things is, oh boy, it's always the same thing. So, okay. So let's see. Oh, yes. Look, actually, I had done that. So I think for anyone who is watching, if you actually speak Arabic, it would be great if you could actually confirm this for us, because I haven't been able to confirm it with any Arabic speaker. And this is kind of like a new thing that we've noticed. So it would be great to know if it is correct or if it is not. And if it is not, then it's like, okay, fine, we move on. What I think is that, so that word that we have there, which is li and then kalimatihi, that thing that is actually marked in there, so that is the thing that makes it the plural. That little aleph makes it the plural. It is not in the rasam, it is not in the skeletal form, so someone has to add it. Without that thing, which is added, so what, 9th century or later, without that one, no one would know how to read this. And of course, we're not going to go down the path of people remember it, because if anybody thinks that, they can actually go and check the website from Shadi Nasser with all of the kirats, and then after a while come and say, no, 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 people remember. They knew how to read these things. They had no idea how to read these things. So they had to guess. And I reckon if this is correct, that they read this as his word, they realized that then conflicted with the theology they were creating. so it has to become his words. But any Arabic speakers, if you can actually see that, please leave us a comment on the comment section after the stream saying, yep, that is right, or no, that is not right, or if any changes to the diacritics would have to happen for the sentence in Arabic to not break and still make sense. Or basically, is it a plausible reading that this was talking about word in singular? That would
Well,
be very helpful.
we know that it's possible reading just because that exact form occurs referring to singular. And then by adding the diacritic, you add this consonant sneakily, and it's crazy how that works, huh? It's like, yeah, alifs are consonants, they're written as full forms, but sometimes when we decide to add them as diacritics, we decide to do that. It doesn't work.
Great. And let's see. So next one. I wonder if it's, oh, the same one, actually, something similar. So would you like to actually read this one? And we have there as well the same animation.
Yeah, so we're looking at this Surah 18, Ayah 27, and iterate what was descended unto thee from the writing of thy Lord. There is no substituter to his words, and thou will never find apart from him a deviated place. So according to the sin, this is then, like you were saying, interpreted as referring to his scriptures plurally, right? Because his words, so therefore it's the Injil, the Torah, the Zabur, presumably, and maybe the Injil as well, but or that, right? And again, words is written words because of the diacritic aleph induced into it. Otherwise, it would be reading as his word, right? There is no substituter to his word. You can't replace Christ with Kabbalah. That's something essentially what they're saying here.
Okay, so ex-Muslim Ahi, great. Great to have you actually on the chat. We haven't seen you for a while, so welcome. So Rasam doesn't differentiate BW singular or plural. In fact, the early manuscripts have plurals with aleph in between, without the dagger alephs. Okay, so that's great. In some of the manuscripts, we have noticed when they actually insert the medial alephs to signify that. But then in others, it looks like, and it's always good for someone who can actually confirm this. So I'll take this as confirmation that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between singular or plural, but very often, or at least sometimes, they would have the plural with the actual aleph in the rasam. Is that
Which
actually what you mean?
suggests, yes, that's what he's saying, and that suggests, and this, I think that's the point of why he's highlighting that exact case. That suggests that no, it wasn't the case that the rasam was always ambiguous between singular and plural, but rather we have instances where they were doing it properly by having the aleph there to signify the plural in the rasam. So therefore, if you see that exact phenomena happening in diacritic alephs, dagger alephs, so-called, right? That shows that there wasn't a consistent approach to this. It's not like, oh, we just never added the medial alephs to signify plural. It's just always been recitation, and then we added we remembered it, and then we added the dagger alephs later. No, there seems to be both cases in the text, and therefore, whenever there was meant to be an aleph there to signify plural, it would have been there in the skeleton, not later added by Persians.
Right. And I think this appears, if I remember correctly, I checked, and I think it was 6 or 7 times in the Quran. So, okay, I think for now, then we can take this as every time that we see that particular word with the dagger aleph, that it was most likely going to be always singular. And
Yeah.
then they said, okay, we cannot have this to be read as singular because it really contradicts everything else. So, great. Okay, thank you for that.
And also, JC, it can't be plural because you can't have a plural shames. You can't pluralize shame. So, well, yeah, but we'll leave that there.
Yeah, we'll leave that there. But okay, great. So we do actually have some claims about Arabic every once in a while here and there. So ex-Muslim Ahi, if you would be so kind, when we actually make any of those claims, we are holding our hands up and hoping that people will be able to see that and then say, that's right, that's wrong, or basically if our claim actually has any weight, sometimes it's just a matter of not just changing something in the diacritics, but quite a few things in the diacritics. And I might say, okay, so maybe it was Kalimati here, and you say, no, it would be Kalimatuhu because of the form. So anything that you notice like this, please let us know. It would really help us get this material actually more and more precise as time goes by. But thank you very much for that, and it really puts my mind at ease until we come up with something else. So And then I think pretty much the last one, and then we'll look at the final two verses, the only two that are dodgy. But now this one, which is the one that everybody just, every Muslim actually knows, which is Surah 4, verse 157. And they're saying, surely we have killed Al-Masih Isa, the son of Miriam, the messenger of Allah, and they did not kill him, and they did not solidify him, they did not crucify him. Normally something like that. This is Murad's. But he was resembled for them, and surely those who variated in him are indeed in doubt of him. They have no knowledge by him except following the presumption, and they did not kill him certainly. Now, this one, of course, is it always for a while has baffled me that every Muslim will know this one, and it will be their top verse to say, you see, you say that Jesus died on the cross, but he didn't, because this verse here in the Quran. Yet elsewhere in the Quran, as we showed as well in a session last week when we talk about the Trinity in the Quran, we see that there are multiple verses that say clearly that Jesus did die. So he did die, but this verse is not saying that he didn't die. It says that they did not kill him. So what do you make of that, Kash?
How is it possible that someone certainly died but wasn't killed? That's totally possible, right? That's not a contradiction. People die all the time who aren't killed. People who die of old age, of sickness, car crashes by accident, they all die, but they weren't killed. And that's what that is most likely pointing to, right? It's that in the New Testament, what Christ says is, "No one takes my life from me. I lay it down on my own accord." So the person who killed Christ, the person who crucified Christ, in some sense, it's all of us because we all put him there, right? But foundationally, it wasn't any given person who did this to him because no one, in accordance with his own words, no one can do this to him. Only he does it to himself, right? So therefore, the idea is that no, they didn't kill him, they didn't crucify him. He did this. It was all in his will, in his plan, and therefore, the text is very clear. Christ died, Christ died, Christ died. But the text is also very clear. Don't feel bad, guys. Don't worry. You didn't do it.
Yeah, and actually, there is another verse in the Quran which I think is almost like a bridge between these and the verses that says that he died, and here that they didn't kill him. There is a verse that says, "If the messenger was to die or was killed, would you then turn on your heels?" And it's like that's a bit weird because it gives those two options, and the Christian Prince actually brings that up quite a bit. It's like, so if he was to die or be killed, is there a third option? Why is that thing in there? And I think that's probably a bit of a bridge
Yeah.
between what was happening, saying affirming the death, but when it comes to the actual people killing him, then having in their minds the Bible saying, no, 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 nobody can actually kill him. The only way that he actually dies is because he lays down his life. Nobody can kill him. So they have that one verse in there, which of course is associated with Muhammad, as with everything else, and it has nothing to do with him. But it looks like it is a little bit of a bridge between these two arguments.
That's brilliant that you brought up the whole, if he were to be killed or to die or to be killed, right? It's a very awkward statement to say without this potential context of having this dispute and this discussion occurring in the society of, you could imagine like, oh, screw the children of Israel, they killed the Messiah. And then no, the Messiah lays down his own life, no one can take it, right? And then to like, ecumenicalize and say, are you really just because he died or was killed, right? To be ecumenical, because there's people who affirm the position that he was killed by the Jews, and there are those who affirm the position he died, but he wasn't killed by the Jews because he gives his own life, right? Like this dynamic would make sense of this awkward phrasing or seemingly awkward phrasing of if he were to die or to be killed. Perfect. I think you summarized that. It's a really good connection.
Yeah, and it just seems a little bit like the Quran is like they had all of the verses and then they chucked them in the air, and in whichever order they actually landed, they said, okay, this is the order of the book. Some things actually you have to go to verses very, very late in the Quran, and then they seem to be kind of shuffled, but it does actually make sense. Um, okay, let's see, actually. It is like saying how life can die. It's still used in a lot of hymns. Yes, it's actually as well quite poetic. And actually, one of the things that they keep saying about the Quran is that it's actually very poetic and stuff. Hence why people like Christoph Luxemburg said actually a lot of it is going to be Christian hymns. I think we can actually see that sort of patterns, particularly at the end of the Quran. All of these very, very short surahs, they feel almost like prayers or hymns or things like that. The early ones, so surahs 2, 3, and 4, particularly, which are very, very large, I don't really see that. It seems to be a completely different genre. But as we unpick more and more, I think probably we will understand that and come up
They
with a
read,
proper thesis.
to me, they read JC like the genre of a theological treatise. It seems like the author has a point to make. They're trying to make a claim. It's a theological point they're making. It's almost like you could see Surah 2 as being a sort of akin to the nailing of the 95 Theses. That's the feeling I get.
Yeah, interesting. And oh, sorry, which one was it? I clicked on the wrong one. And it's mashallah. So this one in the Quran, Allah says several times people did not do something and he did. We need to actually go through the verses that indicate these
Makr,
sort of things.
makr.
The yes, is
Yes.
we've seen the, okay, you explain about the macro thing.
So when it comes to smocker, it's talked about in sin discussions. Christian apologists will bring it up, like, who is the deceiver? It's Satan. Well, according to the Quran, who is the best of deceivers? Well, that's Allah. Checkmate, Muslim, right? But the whole mocker word is a distortion. This idea that it means deceiver, because God is not a deceiver, so it makes no sense for a text talking about God to talk about him as a deceiver. It makes no sense, right? So this mocker word, to make it very simple, it means to sell someone, to give offhand. And it can be used in the context of selling someone into slavery, but it also is used in the Peshitta in the translation of Paul's words in his letters, where Paul refers to betrothal. Okay? And he uses the MKR root in the Peshitta here. This is the Peshitta transmission of Paul's words from the original Greek, right? Translated. And so, therefore, the makar root in the Syriac tradition would have been seen as a dual usage word that refers to both selling someone, as in selling them into slavery, as well as, or selling someone out, like you guys sold out Jesus, this kind of idea, right? As well as to betroth. So, therefore, in the context, it's tying this idea of like, Joseph was sold into slavery and then God exalted him. And after the story of Joseph, he says to his brothers, you guys willed to do against me for evil, but God turned it into good. So it's this constant theme of like, people plotting to do evil, but God utilizing their actions of evil, part of his plan to transform it into something beautiful, like the marriage of Joseph to his Egyptian wife, right? So you mocker, you sell him out, and then I mocker, I betroth, and then I exalt Joseph after the betrothal, right? Like this kind of thing. And therefore, the idea is also with Jesus' example, Judas sells him out, but throughout all of it, God was in control, and he was the best of the mockers. They tried to mocker him, they tried to sell him out, but God is the best mocker because he married Christ to the believers, right? So that's this idea of this mocker verse, and it's tying on this thematic of God always being in control. Despite all the scheming, God transforms it into good.
Yep. And okay. Cool. So I think that was pretty much like it, except for then two verses. But so far, actually, before I put those on screen, so far we have gone through maybe like 20 different verses. And just as a reminder, we haven't actually seen Islam anywhere. We have seen things seem to be talking about the Injil, and then as if by magic, it jumps 600 years and is talking about the Quran. It seems to have these disagreements between Christians and Jews. All is even in one verse it is talking about the Torah, and then in the very next verse is clearly talking about the Torah, but Daif International says, oh no, that's the Quran. So this happens a lot. This is all that we have seen so far. So much for the Islamic dilemma. It hasn't actually been in the book. We are reading. Every time it says it, we say, okay, so that's the Quran. That came before it. Okay, that's the Torah and the Injil. And it's like, no, if you read the verses before and after, you will see it is talking, for example, to the Jews, and that which was sent, it would be Jesus or the Injil according to the Quran, and it has nothing to do with Islam. So this is so far what we have seen. But now we have two problematic verses, or rather three. The first one is actually split in two, and it's these ones here. And they are a real head scratcher. So, Kash, would you like to take care of this problem?
Yeah, so I'll read from Surah 3, Ayah 3, starting there. He continuously descended the writing over thee by the truth, authenticating to what is between his two hands, and descended the Torah and the Injil from before as guidance for humans, and descended the blank. Surely those who covered by the signs of Allah, for them is an intense torment, and Allah is dear of vengeance. And thus, wait, well, we'll leave it there. We'll stick with three and four now. What are your thoughts initially, JC?
I don't know. I'll let you actually handle this one. It's too hard.
Oh, okay. So the way I read this, right, is that the dissension of the kitab by the truth in the Arabic. So it's kind of weird because it puts this whole over the between writing and by the truth. In the Arabic, it's simply kitab bil haq. And the way I understand kitab bil haq is writing by means of inscription, because engraving is the meaning of haq as a root. So the HQQ root refers to engraving or inscribing. So therefore, when I read kitab bil haq, I read it as the writing by means of inscription, or the writing through inscription. And the way I see that is the idea of the flesh of Christ fulfilling the law, as in the law is inscribed into his flesh. So therefore, when I see Kitab bil Haq, I read it as referring to the person, the flesh body, a human of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. So therefore, when I see he continues to descended the writing over the by the truth, or by the Kitab bil Haq, authenticating that which is between his two hands. So this is the crux for me, is that when you're reading it just as such, it really becomes this weird head scratcher. Who is his? Who is he? Right? Between whose two hands? Right? Because it's kind of strange then, because otherwise, what is it referring to? Therefore, in my understanding, Kitab bil Haq is a person, so therefore he is referring to that person. And what is between his two hands would therefore be the Torah, right? The thing is also, just to put this out there, like this whole Baina Yadehi thing seems to be quite interesting, but makes sense to say between his two hands, right? So this is the key. It's like, okay, if Kitab bil Haq is not Jesus, if Kitab bil Haq is the Quran, what is his two hands? Is this referring to God's two hands? It becomes very weird to read the verse. And then also the break point between Surah 3, Ayah 3 and Surah 3, Ayah 4 is weird, right? It sort of feels like it stops between in the middle of a sentence, right? And descended the Torah and the Injil from before as guidance for humans. It seems like it's cutting it off short. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. But foundationally, the whole point is that it doesn't say Quran. It doesn't say anything necessarily explicitly about the standard Islamic narrative. However, this word Kitab bil Haq, because it feels so esoteric, it's so obscure, it's not very clear what exactly is being referred to here, that therefore Kitab bil Haq is being, said to be Quran in this instance. The thing is, Kitab bil Haq doesn't consistently mean Quran in their interpretation. So Kitab bil Haq in other contexts is said to mean the Torah or whatnot, right? So it's not a consistent term. So therefore, you have to, again, read, even any interpretation you can put forward of a framework, you still need to read it into the verse. So the reason why it's somewhat strong of a verse to make, right, is because it mentions by name the Torah and the Injil. So then, therefore, the question that's put forward is, what other writing could it be referring to? Because it's talking about an al-kitab, bil haq, right? That's under the breath there. What exactly does that mean? Who knows? It's just there. Allah speaks like that. Right? So this question becomes, okay, what is the kitab in question if the verse also mentions by name Torah and Injil? And the implication that the sin wants you to get to is, okay, if it's talking about a kitab and it mentions Torah and Injil, the kitab in question must be the only other kitab, right? It must be talking about the Quran. So therefore that's read into the verse, and therefore the idea is that this is affirming this third revelation idea, and that it authenticates the Torah and the Injil. That's then the point of the verse.
Well, for me, what actually gets my attention is, yes, like you said, this his two hands or between his two hands. The thing is, we have just seen this in previous verses, like a moment ago. And in every case that we've seen, it actually meant the Torah. So it was every time it was talking about Jesus authenticating basically the Torah, or at least that is the interpretation. And of course, there is a good chance that it doesn't actually say between his two hands and there is something else and we need to unpick it. Sure. If we go with what we have seen, and then it says that something that a writing is sent by the truth, authenticating what is between his two hands, which before was always talking about Jesus and talking about the Torah. Then, okay, it would be, let's try to re-render this kind of on the fly. So he continuously descended the Injil over thee by the truth, by Jesus, authenticating what is between Jesus's two hands. Up to there, I would say, okay, so that would sort of fit with all of the other verses that we have actually unpacked. The problem that I have is then the way that it continues, because then it goes, and descended the Torah and the Injil. It breaks the verse, and in the very next verse, from before, as guidance for humans, and so on. And I think that if International, even after the from before, he will put an actual stop, and then it'll continue as guidance for humans, something else. So it feels like there is something really wrong with this verse in the way that it is actually structured. Now, it also poses the question, as Kash has hinted earlier, that we are obviously assuming even that the writing is always, or Al-Kitab, is always talking about the basically a book. But depending on the verse in the Quran that you're looking at, sometimes it means the Torah, sometimes it means the Holy Scripture, sometimes it means the Quran. Basically, is like a joker. You can actually just use it in whichever way that you like, and it feels weird. Now, have we maybe been assuming that Al Kitab means a writing, and they have actually hidden a word there, and it means something else, something more spiritual, like some knowledge from God or something like this? We don't know. We haven't actually got to there yet, but I think it is clear that there is something weird with this verse. It just doesn't flow right. It doesn't match anything of what we have seen before. We see how Islam and the Quran is actually read into all of those verses that are talking about either the Torah, the Injil, the Jews and Christians having a conversation. And then we get to those verses and everything just goes weird. It says that a writing descends by the truth, authenticating what is between his two hands, but then it seems to go then back in time and saying, and descended the Torah and the Injil. Is like, why would you even write it in that manner? Actually, the way that you would write it probably is, look, God descended the Torah and the Injil, and he descended the writing. So you would follow even a chronological order. Everything in this verse seems to just make no sense. So I reckon that maybe there is just a lot of problems there um, with the diacritics, and the actual meaning is something very, very different. But
Well,
we will
so
see.
JC, so it's actually very quick to figure out what's even going on with this whole weird breaking of the verse. It's that the words that are translated as from before are min, so that means from, which we both know, and then it's kibla, kabla, right? Kibla. Ooh, why is it talking about Qibla? Why is that meaning before? Well, the reason why Qibla takes on the meaning of before is because Qibla literally means that which is handed down. It means tradition. Okay? That's what we were handed down from your ancestors. It's your tradition, it's your Kabbalah, right? So therefore, it's not saying, it's not linking the verses talking about like blah 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 from before. It's starting a new sentence. It's saying something along essentially from tradition, guidance to mankind. So it's a verse affirming the handed down tradition. So like this is the whole thing. It's like why does all of a sudden Qibla mean before rather than what it actually means, which is either what they read it as of like the Qibla is the direction of prayer, right? No, Qibla is a lot more than just direction of prayer. Qibla is your tradition, that which you were handed down.
What do you think about this comment?
Between his two hands, between the spirit's two hands. So my intuition was a while ago is that between his two hands, because in context, if you don't read it as Kitab al-Haq being Jesus and therefore he referring to Jesus, then the only other option is it's referring to God. And then the question is, okay, so is it God's two hands? So are you authenticating to what is between God's two hands? And then I went on to the lines of, okay, Origen developed this whole, like, it was very, the idea of Christ being the right hand of God was very consistent in the tradition. And then there was also some speculation about, therefore, the Spirit would be the left hand, right? So therefore, the idea is, okay, what's authenticating that is, which is between the Word and the Spirit. And then it's like, oh, because they read it, in the Quran it says that Jesus was both the Word and the Spirit. So therefore, maybe what is between his two hands is the flesh and blood Christ, right? Um, that interpretation I'm a bit more stale on, because now that I'm seeing that there's a lot more funny games here below, we're making assumptions and chasing down pathways which are, let's just say, non-fruitful because we're being deceived. So I'm not sure what I pertaining to what exactly you said. Between the Spirit's two hands, the Spirit's two hands.
I think I think
I think
maybe I
I think that's
know
a bit
like
too much.
what I think it's a little bit because of the spirit being basically the
I
prophets
know
actually
it's
speaking
yes,
through
yes, yes. I know, but
the
still, it
spirit
doesn't.
and things like that.
Yeah.
But we haven't considered the spirit. We have actually considered Jesus, because we've seen in the previous verses when it says Jesus, authenticating the Torah, and in another verse confirming what is between his two hands. So we're thinking Jesus, we're thinking two hands. We have actually considered other things, like meaning maybe that it is God, and then the two hands is basically the Word and the Spirit, and quite a few things. And at the moment, we're still having like a question mark. So this is an interesting comment. I don't think that we've ever actually considered, could it be about the Spirit? So we will bear that in mind as we actually research more. And there is a very good chance that it actually doesn't say between his two hands, and they have just done something funny with the diacritics. So bear with us, and hopefully we'll get to the bottom of it.
And to explain why not Bena would maybe mean something otherwise, it's that yes, BYN is attested as the meaning, as it has this meaning of between, is one of the attestations, but the root itself also has the meaning of to make something known, or to teach, or to instruct, or to explain, right? So if it's therefore, maybe it's that, and it's like, and he taught by his hands, right? He taught by his hands, right? He went around the world. He was a carpenter. Like, maybe it's leaning on something like this. This is the whole point. This is the problem with interpreting Quranic texts, because there's so many layers of deception that once you're like, okay, I'll go with that meaning, and it'll take you into a whole like rabbit hole of things that could make sense, but you've got wrong axioms to begin with. So it's a very fragile endeavor.
Right. Okay. And then the last one, Cash, which is as well a bit of a tricky one.
And thus, 40, this is Surah 42, Ayah 7, and thus we signaled unto thee an Arabic Quran to warn the mother of settlements and whoever is around it, and warn the day of combination, no suspicion in it. A separate group is in the garden, and a separate group is in the blaze. So my first thought, obviously, is wow, okay, this is so clear, right? We're referring to it's speaking about the text as Quran by name. It's referring to it as Arabic as the proper language, so it's unambiguous that it must be talking about a textual material, and therefore checkmate. We've got the Quran talking about the Quran in one verse. Hallelujah, right? So
Yeah.
right, so this whole idea of the mother of settlements, that's got to be Jerusalem, right? Not Mecca, right? And whoever's around it, and it's talking about sending a group to, paradise and to hellfire. But yeah, so what's your take then, JC?
Exactly like you said, we've seen, if this was the only verse that we ever looked at, I would think, okay, well, this confirms everything, the Islamic dilemma and everything, because it's talking about the Quran, it's talking about itself in Arabic, and everything would actually make sense. The problem is when we see that everything else so far has been really misinterpreted, when we get to this one, instead of concluding everything that is written in here is exactly what we read, the first thing that we then consider is, okay, this is not what we are reading. There are problems, they have played with it, and now they have come up with a very different verse, something that seems to confirm everything that they are saying. But on balance of probability, everything that we've seen before is actually talking about the Christians and Jews. So this cannot be talking about Islam. And we do have a problem with Quran, of course, which we have spoken about it before, and we're going to be working on that one again. We have very strong opinion as to what this Quran actually is. And most people have actually heard other explanations that the Quran is not talking about itself. Maybe it's talking about a lectionary, or it's talking about something different. It's not really self-aware thinking that it had descended from the heavens. And I think that one is a given. Now, so we have a problem with the word Quran. Hopefully, I think we're actually going to get to the bottom of that one very soon. Probably we already have. And then the word Arabic. Now, when we think about Arabic, we think the Arabic language, we think um, the Arab lands and so on. Maybe that's actually not the meaning. We have actually got messages as well from some people working with us who say, no, that is more of a modern thing. Back in the day, if they wrote that word, it would actually mean something slightly different. It would not mean the people from that land or that language. So it could be either or. It could be also that this is inserted late in order to justify the Quran, which I don't think is the case. I think the rasam is what it is, but I think the meaning is probably different. And again, normally I would go and say this just confirms everything, except that we have gone through countless verses which they are all wrong. So concluding that this one really proves everything, I think is a lot more likely that we're just not reading these verses right.
Well, the thing is that a lot of these things are, like you were pointing at it, right? A lot of these concepts are anachronisms. So, for example, today, people hear the term Arab and they think like, like, oh, you're anti-Arab, so you are a racist, right? And this is the concept in the mind, and the whole logic is that Arab, the same way, like, you would say Indian or black or whatever. It's like, oh, this is an ethnic designation, right? This whole idea that Arab is even a term that refers to any given ethnic was put together in the 1880s. So it's like, okay, so why do we believe that Arab is a proper ethnic? It's like, well, because we just do. That's our kibla. That's our tradition. That's what we've been told. That's the context we live in, right? But that's anachronistic. That's applying the category that was fashioned in the 1880s as being always there. And the same thing is the case for the Arabic language as such. The idea that you have English, you have German, you have Arabic, right? It's like, no, not exactly, right? Because the idea that Arabic is a language the same way Aramaic is a language is a conflation of categories. Because what we see with the actual Arabic language, as defined in the Quran, is a mixed language, which makes sense given the name Arab, because Arab literally means mixed. Well, it literally means evening, as meaning the mixture between day and night being evening, right? And then in the text of the Quran, or not Quran, sorry, in the text of the Tanakh, we see it used in contexts like, and when Moses was delivered from Egypt, a mixed multitude, Arav, which becomes Arab because va becomes ba in the phonetic. So Arab rev, mixed multitude. So this word Arab means mixed. So if we have a text that says, we descended the Quran Arabia, it would be like, oh, the mixed Quran, or also Arabia has also other connotations. People say it's eloquent and this and that. A lot of different things going on here, but foundationally, we have to be sober-minded about this very idea of this concept of Arab as a language as such, because basically Arab as a language as such appears to be a mixture between various Semitic languages, as in a Creole, as in you have a bulk of Syriac, you have also Aramaic of various dialects, you have loan words from here, loan words from there, right? So that becomes a Creole language, and in time gets recategorized in the collective zeitgeist as, oh yeah, I speak Arabic, right? As if it was a proper language. So that seems to be the problem here, is that we are reading understandings, like preconceived notions, into the text, and also to the Quran word. We made a whole stream on it. We're going to do another stream on it, so I won't get into details on it. But to assume a priori that orthography must be a self-referential title for the text, this has some doubts to it.
Indeed, and here this comment from Insta again. So we have actually it's split into. Isn't this the verse that Gunther Lulling says means Quran in Western dialect? I don't know if it's this exact verse, but yes, he actually comes up with this. We've heard this argument before. There is the other one that Kash mentioned, which is as well like mixed. So from where I'm standing, I'm just putting a question mark over that and saying I'm not going to conclude that this actually means exactly what we interpret as meaning right now in the 21st century. It's like that's probably a new invention. We have to actually delve into it. I really don't think that it means what we are actually reading right now for the reasons that we've explained. We've seen all of the other verses, they're all mistranslated, and this one seems to really point at everything to do with Islam. And it happens to be the case, then fair enough. But I think we've seen more than enough to conclude that that's actually not the case at all. So we have actually a few questions to actually go through, so we can actually click on those. Before we move on to those, Kash, do you have any comments about the Western dialect?
Yeah, so the reason why the whole idea of Western, right, is because so Arab means evening, literally, and it also means mixed primarily. Those are the two senses. And it's extended to the idea of Western because the evening is associated with the sunset. Where does the sun set? In the West, right? Is that correct? Is that correct? Sun sets in the West, rise in the East. Is that correct? Right. So yeah, that's the idea of evening people, right? To be called an evening person is to be someone who comes from the land which comes from where the sun sets, i.e., West.
Yeah, and I'm actually not really sure about the meaning of this word. Yes, like others that we have discussed before, which when you see scholars that they are all having different interpretations of it, I try to stay out of it, let them battle it out. And then once we actually have a final answer, or when we have seen all of the verses and we say, okay, now we know exactly the meaning that actually fits this, and we have the linguistic case, then we can say it. In the meantime, I can just think about it and say, okay, there is more than we can actually see there. But one thing at a time is a very, very big book, and we have to actually go through a lot of stuff. Now, so let's go through some questions. So, ex-Muslim Ahi, well, this one is for you, Kash.
Absolutely. So I'm going to have you type into a search bar, write in Sedra. So it's like Sedra, Sedra, and then just put in Syriac. Sedra, Syriac. You'll find a site that's called Beth Marduto Sedra. You click on that. All you need now is to get access to some kind of Syriac script form, like a keyboard, or you can use LexiGloss, or it's called, no, lexilogos.com. That's what I use for my Syriac keyboard. And all you got to do is write in your Syriac word form into the search bar. You have to go on the word search section of the source. You type in the search bar your Syriac script orthography, and it'll find you all possible matches with slight plus minus. It's going to give you some also similar options. It's very, very effective.
Kash, if you want to actually type in here on the chat the actual link to the website, I can just actually show it on the screen as well.
In the YouTube chat, you mean?
Yeah. So I can show it in
Yes.
this way as well. I can click, so it will be easier.
We'll do that. Okay, send the link.
Okay, so here you go. So you guys can actually copy that and have fun with it. It's very interesting. So let me actually just go through and see other questions. I'll leave that one in there for a minute. So another one here as well from Insta saying, well, Tawhid comes from Ethiopian Tawhido, which is Miaphysite Christology. What do you think about Tawhid? Unification.
Well, Tawhid, I think, goes back to the Miaphysite tradition, where the idea, of course, is that Christ is, you have this unified nature, right? You have this Tawhedo. So this tracks back to the Tawhedo, which was a theological position that was taken by the Miaphysites. So they called their church the Tawhido Church, right? So that's where we get this whole idea of Tawhid. And effectively, the whole premise, the whole inclusion of Tawheed in the whole zeitgeist and the memory of Islam points to the fact that they were Christologically Miaphysite before all the shit hit the fan.
Right. And okay, I think that has been on screen now for a while. So another one, I think you will have some things to say about.
Regarding the Quranic authors, Christian beliefs, what do you think about Joe's idea that they were a monophysite Christians writing to a Jewish audience. Arianism doesn't make sense to me. Thanks. Yeah, it does seem like they were mono, Maya. You know, people have quibbles about which word is the correct term, right? The people who are called this, they prefer the term Miaphysite, but you know, if you want to polemically attack the monophysite, that's how it worked out in history. But yeah, it does seem to be the case, like we were just touching on with the whole Tawhido or Tawhedo, right? And Tawhid, it does appear that these are Mon or Miaphysite Christians writing to a Jewish audience and attempting to convert them to Messianism. That's certainly the case. It
Yeah, and
seems
in
to be the
terms
case
of
to me.
and we do have, of course, is John of Damascus who says these instructions come from an Arian monk. But then we also have the Al-Kindi that says he's an Nestorian monk and is okay. So we know something was going on, but when we are looking at verses and it keeps saying things like, "Well, Jesus was, he died, he resurrected," and all of these things, and it's talking about the Holy Spirit. What I like to say is it's possibly just one heresy, but it's also possible that the Quran was just a compilation of many different things. And maybe there are sections that the author had in his mind Christianity, and then another author provided other works, and he had in his mind Arianism or Nestorianism or something bizarre. So we will see. At the end of this whole exercise, we will know exactly what happened. But for now, I like to keep it as vague as possible and saying, okay, maybe is Christianity and also a number of heresies, and as we unpick more and more, we will know for sure. But for now, I think it's probably early days to actually tell exactly what it was. But we will see. This one, so from Miguel or Miguelitux, the theory that these are instructions from an authority to a preacher telling him what to preach out of a liturgical book has always appealed to me. It could explain what's between his hands and so on. Yes, there are quite a few different theories as to, well, what is happening. And as we dig more and more, we see exactly what's happening. One thing that always bugs me is that there are so many verses that begin with the word say. In theory, at least, that's what it says. So it will say these things. And it doesn't seem to make sense to me. So let's think about it from the standard Islamic narrative point of view. So Allah says to Jibril, to say to Muhammad what is in the eternal tablets, right? That's actually what we've been told. And then Jibril is there in front of Muhammad and he says, okay, dude, here we go. Okay, this is what it says. Okay, say blah, 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 blah. Muhammad will go to the people and he will never say the word say. He will imagine that the sentence is say, worship one God alone. When he gets there in front of the people, what he would say literally is worship one God alone. He wouldn't say and then followed by the statement. It just makes absolutely no sense. So that's why Joe from Red Judaism, he has this thesis that I really like, and I think it works in probably quite a few sections of the Quran, which is maybe it was meant to be acted out in the world. So you have basically like a play, and then there is a guy there who is narrating a story, and then this will be like a cue for somebody that is on a stage that he has to say these words or those words. So if the guy is playing the role of Jesus, at that point, nobody will say the word say. That guy will just say the words, almost like a play of Shakespeare. So there are some verses that they actually would make a lot of sense. Now, whether that is the truth or not, I don't know. And if it is throughout the whole book, I don't think so. But there are some sections that would really clarify many things, including why so many verses are very, very vague, that if they're being acted out, you don't need the details because you can see the characters, they have been introduced by, I don't know, the director of the play or something. So you would know who those people are and you would understand the context visually. Um, that could explain why some verses are so vague. And about a preacher, yes, a lot of it, if you actually read it, it almost feels like someone is telling someone else, hey, dude, this is what you need to say. When you go and you speak with those guys there, when you speak with the crowd, say these words exactly. It seems to fit, but then it's not very consistent throughout the book. So we need to keep digging. Maybe there is quite a few things all together into one. What do you think, Ash?
Yeah, I think we have to. I don't know about this whole theory about the play. I feel like there's some parts that match it, but also I have this problem with the whole kul word, which is, the word that they
Yeah.
translate to mean say, because I don't find there the closest I can find is a sense that means to voice, and therefore I can see maybe that's how it's maybe derived from that, maybe that's authentic. But I also find other very interesting senses of the word, like for example, QWL in the Aramaic refers to a lenient decision. And maybe therefore it's like Kul is then saying like this following quote or text is the lenient position or something. Like I'm not saying anything strictly here, right? I'm just saying I don't like I don't want to go and theorize based on glosses, as in like the reading of a text, like saying, okay, this is talking about, say this. If I'm not confident it means say, I'm not going to speculate on, what could hypothetically have been the true nature of this text according to this fabricated reading, right? So it's not. I don't want to speculate too much on, you know, uh, not very firm glosses, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think we can just leave it with maybe, but we feel like there is a lot more to that story, and then we will see as we unpack more and more. Now, this comment I think is very interesting because it's something that Kash and I we have discussed before, to do with manuscripts and how they were actually writing things, particularly when we look at ancient manuscripts, and it's almost impossible to tell them apart. And we have the feeling that we should be able to tell them apart, and there is a problem. So, but actually, before Kash comments on this one. So ex-Muslim, it looks like you're actually looking at manuscripts and stuff, and that is actually great knowledge. Plus, it looks like you actually understand as well the Arabic. So if you would be okay for to look actually at the things that we are doing to do with the Arabic and stuff, and either give us reassurance or saying no, that's actually not right. That would be great because we're trying to understand as much as possible, and the more people we can get looking at the difficult questions, the better. And it looks like you are already very much tuned in to the Quran saying something very different and seeing all of these problems. So if you are willing to do that, please do send us a comment later. We can actually stay in touch and hopefully you can help with this. And it would help us a lot.
So in terms
And
of
now over to you.
yeah, so in
Yeah.
terms of this, yeah, it's very interesting. There's multiple aspects of it. So I'm guessing you're referring to the way that the Y is written. Are you talking about the Y being written in the final position? So I'm gonna ask that and get back to that. So, but broadly, the entire Arabic script is super influenced. You can tell by the Syriac script, especially the like you were pointing out the estrangalo. Like I pronounce it terribly, but the cursive Syriac script. So, for example, the entire logic behind the peaks. So, like which consonants are peaks. Like the Syriac script, you can see the N is very much like the perfect bowl-shaped peak, and then like the other ones, there's slight differences. For the B, it has like a hook that goes to the left, right? But foundationally, it's like the same set of consonants which are sort of close to this peak form, then become or then are this peak form consonant in the Arabic. Also, just a little side thing, my intuition is that the original Arabic script form distinguished between the different consonant peaks by the height of the peak. And I feel this because when I'm looking at manuscripts, I see oftentimes it's a seeming standardization happens of the peaks. Like out of nowhere, there seems to be differences in height, but then a second inking comes in and adjusts them all to become the same height. Which is very weird, almost like you want to make the text more ambiguous, such that there's more reading into it that can be done. But yeah, so I've definitely noticed the similarities between the Syriac Estrangalo and what we see then of this attested Arabic script in the Quran.
Okay, great. And yeah, if ex-Muslim, if you actually have an actual manuscript in mind that you say, hey, so I have noticed this one in the Sana in that page or something like specific like this, we can actually look at that and then we say, okay, yeah, this is exactly what it means, what he means. This is how it is in this position. And that would really be helpful. Something that we have noticed is, and we're trying to unpick, is that some scribes, they seem to actually do different peaks for different consonants, and it's very difficult to tell them apart. If, for example, he meant a nun in a middle position or a ba in a middle position, and sometimes they seem to actually be different. It's almost like the scribe knew immediately which one he was writing. They were slightly different, but for us, it's just a little bit difficult. And I don't want to assume that it is simply, or not through the context, that they could just read it all without any diacritics. To this day, Muslims can actually read very basic, or rather Rasam with very basic diacritics, but they need some diacritics because sometimes you actually have to tell them apart. So, and we will see. Let's see what else. Oh, okay. So,
There was
Open Quran 16. Yep.
yeah, I'm looking at that, and I was just got distracted by one thing in particular, is that there's this word that is translated as a human being, which is B Shin Ra. And just basically, I find it very interesting that BSR, so if it wasn't Shin, but it was an S, BSR has the meaning of incarnate in the Aramaic. So that's kind of cool. But anyway, I can't actually comment too much directly here on the verse that ex-Muslim Aki, because I'd have to look deeper at the full verse here. So it'll take some time, so it's not optimal for this kind of context.
Yeah. So the verse 103, actually, just looking at Murad, it says something like, and indeed, we already know that they say, surely only a mortal having a skill, so a human, is teaching him the tongue of he whom they deviate onto a foreign, onto his foreign, and this is an evident Arabic tongue. So we need to actually unpick that when I look at the manuscripts. It actually do seem to actually talk about the narrative as it is told by somebody saying, oh, look, this person is speaking Arabic. But because we have problems with the word Arabic, including in some verses that we are actually looking at, there are some where we've seen is all talking like about Jesus and about the Spirit, and then all of a sudden in the middle is talking about Arabic language, and it's like, no, this doesn't fit. We have already unpacked the verses before and after. They are talking about Jesus. It cannot actually mean Arabic. So wherever that word appears, we are going to be very, very cautious. But now we're going to look at 16:103 and see exactly what happened in the old manuscripts and these sort of things. So thank you for
And
pointing that one.
as an ex-Muslim Aki, I mean, like what you're like reading there or gleaning, it does seem like, yeah, that's definitely what's happening here, is that they're touching on the idea of, a foreigner teaching or this or that. Like this seems to be there, right? And this can apply. You don't need the sin, right? In fact, the sin is like, kind of like, it doesn't necessarily provide any detailed information about this kind of concept, but this was a contention most surely in the context of where the Quranic text was written, because this was like a smashing together of different languages and traditions, right? So you would imagine making a problem out of taking knowledge or being taught by those outside of the linguistic tradition, and these kinds of topics would certainly make sense as being involved in the origins of the Quran. Like that we would expect to find something like that. So it would make sense. It doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with a sin, is the thing.
Yep. And let's see. So instant here, didn't the Arabic script, so the actual script, develop from Nabatean Aramaic? I think I have heard that claim before. I think, don't quote me on this, I could be wrong. I think the earliest inscription in Arabic, as we would recognize it in the Arabic script, was in the 400s. I can't remember if it's 400s or 4th century. So I'm going to say in the 400s, and somewhere in the region of Edessa. So I think that's the first one, and it was like in a chapel. And seeing as many Christian missionaries, they actually went around the world teaching or preaching the gospel, and they actually created the scripts in order to be able to write the gospel and actually then teach it to the locals. I would assume that it was Christian missionaries who most likely created the script for the Arabic language, which they spoke, and they didn't write it down. So they created basically the script for that. I could be completely wrong about that, and they were very happy with their script before, and these guys actually created it from the Nabatean Aramaic. So I'm not really sure, but I think the earliest one that we found was around the 400s and a little bit north than the modern day Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and
Is that, yeah?
in terms of the script, I mean, the thing is with ex-Muslim Aki pointing out these potential influences, it seems it couldn't be coincidental, right? These similarities between the Estrangalo, which would be the Syriac script form, and the Arabic script form. So maybe it's the wrong approach to sort of think, okay, is it the Syriac? Is it the Nabatean Aramaic? Like, where does it derive from? Maybe the correct answer is rather actually a multitude of influences rather than necessarily like an ancestor originator, right? It's not like oh, we had the tradition of Nabatean Aramaic and here is the successor of that, right? So maybe it's something other. Maybe it's more so a large amount of influences that culminate in the Arabic script form and language.
Yeah, and actually two comments then that they go actually hand in hand. Between his two hands is, so I actually thought about Arabic, but Arabs did exist before Quran as a group, and we have inscriptions for them. Yeah, very true. Premise open to your research. So yes, certainly
I can
the Arabic
clarify.
language was already there, and that's absolutely fine. It is the actual script because we know that
No,
there
no, no,
were.
JC. Let me clarify
Oh,
because it's talking about my statement, right? So to be very clear, it's like the term Arabic to describe a people's existed, but it was an umbrella term, right? So like the way that I could refer, like the way people refer to Saracens, then it becomes this whole ethnic identifier and all this. Most likely, originally, the whole Saracen term wasn't an ethnos. It wasn't pointing to an ethnic, but it became so. What I'm suggesting is essentially the same thing in terms of Arabic, right? Like the term Arab became an ethnic category in the 1880s. This is not known by many people, right? So yes, there were people who were described using the term Arabia or Arab, right? But that does not necessitate that it's therefore a proper ethnos, right? The way that someone says, I am German, it's not necessarily the same case to make that Arabic is therefore in that category. It became known, and now it's known as that category of a proper ethnic, a proper language, a proper people, right? But essentially, what I see is happening is the mixture became elevated as a primary color. Like think of it like this, like confusing a secondary color with a primary color. A secondary color is a mixture of two primary colors, right? But therefore, to elevate the mixture of colors or of primary colors and say that this is another primary color, it seems like that's what happened. You have this category of Arab. Those are the ones who are the mixed people, right? The mixed people, the evening people, the ones who live westward, the ones who are in the desert, right? So those are we use the term Arab. But that does not necessarily mean that they use that term and have the same conception then as we're sort of told to believe today. That's what we're putting forward, right? Like Arabic language as such. Like that's what I'm asserting, JC. I'm asserting this that the Arabic language, as conceptualized today, that did not exist in the 7th century because we didn't yet have the Persians to make up, what the roots mean yet, right? So like a lot of this is anachronistic. We're conflating categories, and we're also not understanding like people can use a term back then in one way, and us today use it in a different way. And that conflation of things results in anachronisms. That's what I would say on that topic.
yeah, and actually linking to that is actually this other comment. So, well, Arabs, of course, were all over the place, but Aramaic, so as a language, was the lingua franca. So this is actually quite interesting because let's think about it this way. Hopefully, I'm actually right about this. The Arabic language would not have been as theologically rich as the Aramaic or the Hebrew or other languages like that, because they didn't have the theology for it. They would have had no need for it. The only way that they can actually use very theologically rich words is if they are in continuous contact with those people and then they take the words. We do that even in English. We have words like Messiah is not an English word. We've actually got that one, and now it's been obviously updated for the language. The same with Christ, Christos. So that is Greek. We use lots of words that they have actually been created in different languages. Logos, they have an actual meaning. It is explained to them. They are using it a lot. And then when that language is in contact with other people, they don't just say, okay, let's sit down and come up with a completely new word that means that thing. Very often they just actually borrow it. So I think it's very likely that the Quran is full of those things where they didn't have the words to express something because they never actually needed that before. And then all of a sudden they are there with the Jews, with the Christians, and the theological languages in the region would have been Aramaic, Hebrew, and Arabic would be lacking. That is actually just my guess. They would be lacking, and they would have to actually borrow words from those languages, and then they understand the meaning. But 5 minutes earlier, they didn't actually have that word in their language because they didn't need it before.
Well, I
Do
would
you think
take it,
that's
JC, I would take it further. I think that the very idea of saying, like, they spoke, there's some Aramaic, some, Hebrew, some Syriac, and then some Arabic. I think that's actually the whole conceit. Like, that's the mistake to make, to conceptualize it in the same category as these other languages, given the fact that Arabic as such is defined by the Quranic text usage, which is then defined by the dictionaries and so forth, reading and an interpretation into the text. So it's anachronistic to even talk about the category of the Arabic language in the 7th century. That didn't exist yet. Back then, it was simply known as speaking mixed, right? As such, right? Oh yeah, what do you speak? I speak mixed. Oh yeah, I use some Syriac words, some Aramaic. We speak a Creole, so we have a mixture of different languages, right? But the question then becomes, okay, so which words then are these supposed quote unquote Arabic words? Are we pointing to the Safaitic? Are we pointing to the Talmudic? Are we pointing down south to the Sabaic? Like, what exactly are we talking about when we say Arabic, right? They spoke Arabic. Which words are Arabic? Given the fact that every single word which wasn't quote unquote Arabic became known as Arabic, the question becomes, what is left over at the end of all this sifting? What Arabic existed?
right? Well, if we were to judge the Arabic language by looking at the Quran, we know that the Quran has Aramaic words and Hebrew words and Ge'ez and Pahlavi and all sorts. So it could be very much as actually that is what the early Arabic actually became once they actually start to speak a language. They start to adopt a religion. They start to adopt concepts that they didn't have before, and the language actually develops because also a language changes, and it changes a lot. If we look at the 7th century and they use the word for paradise, well, they have paradise and heaven. And paradise, it actually comes from the Persian language. And it's like, okay, so that word then is not Arabic. And it's like, well, just like in English, Christian is not English. It comes from a different place, but then you make it your own and then it becomes English. So maybe something like this actually happened. But anyway, because we have the Quran, which is what gives us this snapshot of what was happening very, very early on, whether the words were always there or whether they were borrowed from any other sources, for us, it's all the same. We just want to know what the book says.
So JC, I'll just give another example, right? It's like you were saying, like, for example, like, oh, this word becomes Arabic, right? So like, oh, Furqan is an Arabic word which means criterion. It's actually Furqana, which is a Syriac word which means deliverance, redemption, salvation, right? So it's like, okay, so that was a Syriac word, and then it became an Arabic word with an entirely different meaning, right? We go to another word. Oh, we look at Hawariyun. Oh, it turns out it's like it's a Gez word from the Gez Bible referring to the disciples. So it's like, okay, that in our conception of that's an Arabic word, but it turns out, yikes! It turns out it was again, was also, it was a Gez word, or then we go to this other word. So the thing is, at the end of this whole process, the question is, what are we even left with as being this category in our minds of Arabic proper? Like, what even is this word when we say Arabic? Given that we see that after this, we go through the sifting process, we find that under every Arabic word seems to be another language. So it's like, okay, so at the end of the day, after this whole process, what even is Arabic then?
Yeah. So what do you? How would you actually then use the word Shekinah, which we analyzed on another live stream just a little while ago? How then would you think that it made it into the book, and actually how it made it into the language when it meant one thing, and then in Arabic it meant another? What are your thoughts as to how that transition could have happened?
The transition was the transition from understanding that Arabic was a mixed language to the idea as such of Arabic as a language of its own. That was the transition. Because the text was initially, wait, can you remind me, JC, what you were asking with the exact example?
But Shekinah, we know that in Aramaic and in Hebrew, we know what it means, and it is
Right.
dwelling, and Christians would see as the Holy Spirit. But then in the Quran, even though it says very clearly the
Right.
Shekinah
So in
that was
right.
sent
So in
down on
context,
the
yeah.
messenger and everything. Yeah.
So in context, we can clearly see that the understanding of the author was that this form SK, Sakina or Shekinah, was referring based on how the context is using it, right? The author understood that Shekinah as to be the indwelling, the dwelling presence of God, right? So the text attests this contextually, that the author understood this meaning as different from the Arabic meaning. So it's like, okay, so did the author not speak Arabic? Because if we have this idea that sakina is an Arabic word, which means tranquility, right, and so forth, it's like, no, that you totally got it wrong, right? There is no Arabic word. Again, you have a Hebrew word, a Syriac word, and in this case with Shekinah, you have this Hebrew that goes into the Aramaic and eventually the Syriac as a word throughout all the tradition, referring to the indwelling presence of God, right? So therefore, in the text, you see it used in the context of the indwelling presence of God, and so forth and so forth. So clearly, whoever wrote this text either didn't understand Arabic because they're using the word wrong, or the whole concept of Sakina being an Arabic word is an anachronism.
Or they simply just initially they knew how to read it, they knew what it meant, they had the full meaning like understood, but then by the time that they start to create the theology around the Quran and trying to give it another meaning, when there are words that they have borrowed like that one, they have to say, okay, no, now we need a new word because that one is not really matching our political agenda and the theology that we are explaining to the people. Okay, so how about Sakinat? Okay, it means tranquility. So they have to actually do something. Maybe they find like within the root something that it is plausible, and they say, okay, so that's the word that it is written, even though 5 minutes earlier or until a little while before, everybody would have understood exactly what it said, and it was something very, very different. Basically, very, very naughty.
Basically, the switch happened when they told the lie for the first time that Arabic as such exists as a language. Because look, even JC, what you were saying, it's like, oh, maybe this word they borrowed. The implication is that there is a language base called Arabic, which is the native language, and then they borrow Syriac, they borrow Hebrew, they borrow Aramaic. But again, you actually have to substantiate that, because once you drill to the bottom, there is no such thing as like, oh yeah, that was the Arabic language, and then they borrowed from the Syriac. No, Arabic as such is itself the mixture of all these languages, and then it becomes known as a language proper. That's the big conceit when a bunch of Persians tell you that Arabic is its own language.
Right. So, or pretty much to summarize, we know that there is quite a few problems with the Quran, including with the actual word Arabic, and some of them we actually have answers. Others we're keeping with a question mark, and we keep digging into the Quran to actually understand what it says. We look at manuscripts and all of that to try to understand it. But so today's topic was the Islamic dilemma, and I think we have actually shown that pretty much every single verse that it is interpreted as the Quran confirming what was before or things like this, they are not there. And there is only two exceptions, one in Surah 3, the other one in Surah 47 or whatever it was, which they are a little bit dodgy. And instead of concluding that those verses then confirm the whole narrative, seeing as all of the others are mistranslated, we conclude that it is more likely than not that those verses are just mistranslated, misinterpreted, and we will try to get to the bottom of it, and that will happen hopefully in the near future as we get more people as well helping with their insights, and it would be great to have closure on some of those verses, but that will be some other time. I think for today is probably time to call it a day. Kash, would you like to say some departing words before we close off?
So we didn't like fully put a bow tie on everything, but to boil it down, right? We looked through all these different verses which supposedly have something to bear on the question of the Islamic dilemma. What we found is that it has to be read into the verses because it's not clear based on the actual content that this has anything to do with any Quran. It doesn't use the term Quran, etc., etc. Right? And then after the process, we end up with these two verses that one could make an argument about. One could argue that these are affirming the standard Islamic narrative, and in one instance, we have no reference to the term Quran. It's referring to the Kitab bil-Haq. But because it refers to the Torah and the Injil, therefore the Kitab bil-Haq must be the Quran. So again, you have to read it in, even that one. Right? You have to read that this is referring to the whole Quran thing, blah, blah. So that was the one of them. That was Surah 3, verse 3. And then the other instance that we were looking at, where it does use the term Quran, in fact, it uses the word Al-Quran Arabiya, right? So in that context, it's not clear what this Quran even is. So basically, you have to patch all the things together. In the verses which talk about a dissension of something, don't use the term Quran. And then in verses that do use the term Quran, it's vague what it's even referring to. And then you mash it all together and you say, okay, this explains this, this explains this. It all maps together in the fact that Quran is the self-referential title of a book, and then you fill in all the gaps about the man, the myth, the place, or the man, the book, the place gets filled in. So yeah, we'll leave it there.
And actually, yes, this comment actually, I think it actually summarizes everything very well, which is that by altering the text and meaning, they created their own dilemma. And yes, so far, every time that we've seen something that contradicts other things, that creates plot holes, when we actually really do a deep dive and we analyze those verses, it turns out that there isn't an actual contradiction. There isn't an actual dilemma. It is because they created a different story and they put that one on top, that then they create these problems. But when we actually go to the root and we see what the text is saying, like most of these contradictions, they just go, which is actually very interesting. And yes, it looks like as they try to explain things, they create more problems and then they have to fix them. And then they create more problems and the whole thing goes like this. That's why we're trying to cut through all of that and say, okay, fine. Let's just look at what the Quran says and we take it from there without reading a lot of stuff that is not there. So yeah, very good. So Kash, would you just like to say final words and then we close the shop for today?
Yeah, I think, JC, we can even say that, so tomorrow, hopefully, if everything goes well, we'll be having a show on the Islamic Origins YouTube channel, which should be very exciting. We look very much forward to that. So I'm sure that, if you're on our stream, I'm sure you're also subscribed to Mel already. But if not, give him a subscribe, right? And check us out then tomorrow then on that channel. It should be great. Should be great.
Yeah, so I think this week is probably going to be completely packed for us, actually doing things pretty much every day, which is great. So working very hard this week. Now, so hopefully we will see you tomorrow at the Mel's channel, if that still goes ahead, unless we actually have to do another day. And otherwise, we will be back here most likely on Wednesday as we try to stick to our schedule. So thank you all for being here, for interacting with the chat, for sending very, very cool questions. Your support is very much appreciated. So stay well. We hope to see you soon. And until then, God bless you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
There is only one Quran, right? Every Quran in the world is the same. That's what you've been told. You have been told a lie!
26 of the Quran.
26 different Quran!
There are 0 Dawa guys apparently left on the planet who are willing to defend Muhammad in a debate.
Everybody can go and read it. This is a book full of mistakes in Arabic, in the grammar, in the spelling, in the pronunciation.
Whoever wrote the Quran made an error because they didn't quite understand what was written in the 7th century in the Torah and the Injil.
As promised, I will give you more than 20 reasons why I left Islam in this video.
We know that stories about Muhammad were made up on an industrial scale.
What in the world is this Injil?